So today, my truck wouldn't start, as in my big truck. The starter motor would just spin. Now, when that happens and it's just spinning, it's the engagement gear from the starter motor, because the inertia, and it's a spring mechanism. The inertia, when it spins, it's the spring comes out, to stretch out, and that gear goes into the flywheel, and then they turn. So one turns the other, and as the motor starts turning, it's able to start producing power, and then it runs. This particular truck has always had issues, and today it didn't have any teeth. And I will show you an example of that right now. Hey guys, so right now, if I don't even see in there, I'll just turn the flashlight on. Now you can see the engagement gear, so this is the flywheel, and over here you have your starter motor, and this will be where the engagement gear is. And as it's been told to me, and as I have first expected, there. Right now I'm just turning the flywheel in hopes that it might find a better connection. Okay, that sounded good. So hopefully, since I turned that manually, I'll be able to start the truck. And once I got it started, I will not be turning it off. Alright guys, I'm back. And let's get started. So, this crude drawing is going to be the engine. And this is the first time I'm explaining it this way. So let's make it bigger. Let's make that the engine. So this is the engine. Now, typically, you'll have a starter motor right about here. And then you'll have your transmission, which will be, I'm going to put a space in between, right here. Now this one's a 10-speed, so there you go. You got your high-low switch right there. You go up and down. So right here, you have what's known as a flywheel. So, as I was saying before, we have a starter motor. And the way it works is, yeah, you see that? You have all these teeth going around the flywheel. And it's a lot more circle than that. But the flywheel is actually right here. And when the starter motor, which is a much smaller gear, spins, it starts turning the engine. And once the engine fires, this disengages, and the engine can run on its own power. Now these are our high torque motor. So for this little gear to turn this big gear at the appropriate RPM, it has to spin fast. Because the normal idling RPM engine, revolutions per minute, normal engine idles around 500 RPM, 800 RPM, 1000 RPM, right around there. So this little guy has to spin so that this runs at 1000 RPM. So this guy here, depending on what the ratio is, so let's say this has 10 teeth, that has 100 teeth, it's 10 to 1 spin ratio. So this has to be at 10,000 RPM, so this is at 1,000 RPM. And that's why when it does spin, and it misses, it makes that really like gear grinding noise. Now, how it works is you have your motor, your electric motor, positive, negative. Oops, two positives. There. So you got your positive and negative and all that. Those big heavy wires because of how much power it's drawing. Then you have your gear, which will kind of be it'll be a step gear. So when it goes to grab onto the flywheel, the first part of it is got a bit of a bevel to it. Then the rest of the gear will be the size of the flywheel, the width of the flywheel. So when it comes in, grabs the gear, and then it can spin. Now, what allows this to engage and disengage is you have a shaft that this gear sits on, and it has grooves in that shaft. It's also got a little spring inside it. And when the electric motor spins, the spring releases or pushes forward. Because now that it's spinning, it's going to want to push forward with the spring. So it's a what's that word? It's very late for me, so I'm just trying to think. It's part of inertia. When things spin, they come apart. And that's what happens with the spring, so it comes forward, and then this gear runs along the other shaft, and it just comes out to engage into the flywheel. And once it's done spinning and the power's off, it disengages and comes back. And this all happens within a fraction of a second. So when you start your car, the car nowadays, because it's all electronic, you can just touch the ignition and the ignition will start. It's all computerized, and the computer knows when the engine's running, it knows when the starter motor engages, and then once the engine's running, it disengages the starter motor. Very easy. So you can't double start your car, and you can't over start your car. Now, what happened today, and you heard it in the video, is that you get that spinning noise. You might even heard some of the pieces of metal flying off, because I know I did. So what's wrong with our truck is these gears right here, they're like that. They're missing. So what's happening now is it's throwing out, but it's just spinning. There's no gears to actually push. So what has to happen is this starter motor has to be unbolted. It probably weighs a good 60 pounds because it's huge. It is huge. Being a diesel engine, high compression, you need a high torque electric motor. And all it really has to happen is you pop that off, take the motor out, and there's rebuild kits for this kind of stuff. They give you brushes for the motor, that's another story. And they give you all new springs, and then obviously a new engagement gear for the flywheel. Now, typically, on a flywheel, there's two wear points, because the engine only stops in two areas. And these areas, over time, start to lose their teeth. Just wherever the flywheel decides to stop all those times. The rest of it will be fine. So if your engagement gear is still good, you can move the ring gear with because they have an inspection port. So you have your bell housing going all the way around, and then you have an inspection port right here, so you can take a look. You can actually see into your bell housing. And all you have to do is get a piece of flat rod or a chisel, which is what I did today, or a pry bar. Sorry, I used a pry bar, not a chisel. Thought about a chisel, saw the pry bar. I'm like, okay, pry bar it is. And you can move this so that you would have your flywheel gears that are not worn in place. Because once you get this thing started, it's very easy to keep it going. The other thing you can do, because your starter motor can wear out over time, is it'll create dead points where the brushes are. And it won't engage. So a lot of times people will take a rubber mallet and they will hit the motor, and then the motor will engage because it won't be on the dead point from where the motor stops. And once again, like, things wear in a certain way. Flywheel will want to stop in two positions based on how the engine stops. Same thing with the electronic motor. It has an area where it likes to stop and start. So that process of starting and stopping wears out over time. Now, when I was talking about the brush motors, each of these older motors have metal brushes that have the positive and negative, and that's what causes it to turn and whatnot. Over time, these things wear out and don't have such a great connection. That's part of the rebuild kit. So you just open up the motor, you slide these out, and it'll be a little block with some copper wire. You just reattach the copper wire, put the block in. Might even have a spring to touch the motor, and Bob's your uncle, you're good to go again. So, and then starter motors can also be on the transmission, rare, very rare, and they can also be inside the engine, like the North Star Cadillac engines. I'm told, I don't know if this is true, but they'll be inside the engine. So to get to it, you would have to dismantle the top and take the engine out, I guess. I don't know. I've never actually seen it. I've only been told that it was actually built into the engine. And that's their 32 valve North Star engines. Great engines, very powerful, hard to fix. But again, if you can afford a Cadillac, it would be a Lincoln too. It's a Lincoln. Yeah, so this is basic, very rudimentary, and gives you a slight understanding of what goes on inside an engine, transmission, flywheel, starter motor, kind of deal. So, with that all being said, I hope you enjoyed my quick video, and stay tuned for the next one, whatever the heck that is.